The SCP Foundation has thousands of objects, entities, and anomalies locked away in facilities across the world. But safe doesn't mean harmless, Keter doesn't mean most dangerous, and some of the worst things imaginable are technically the easiest to contain. Today we're breaking down every SCP object class and exactly what each one actually means, starting with the one everyone gets wrong, safe. Safe class does not mean safe. Let me be very clear about that up front because the name does an enormous amount of damage to people's understanding of the entire classification system. Here's the thing, safe class is about containment complexity, not danger level. The Foundation classifies something as safe when containment is reliable, predictable, and cheap. That's the whole criteria. A button that destroys the universe when pressed is, theoretically, safe class, because the containment solution is just don't press the button. Lock it in a room, walk away, nothing bad happens. Safe. What safe actually measures is research maturity. The Foundation has studied the anomaly enough to know exactly what triggers it, what contains it, and what it costs to keep it that way. That knowledge earns the classification, not harmlessness. But Euclid is a different story entirely, and that's where things start getting genuinely unpredictable. Euclid is the class most people encounter first and understand least. It sounds simple enough, a step above safe, a step below Keter, but that framing misses what Euclid actually means. Euclid is where predictability starts falling apart. Safe means you lock it in a box and you know exactly what happens next. Euclid means you lock it in a box and you're mostly sure what happens next. That gap between know and mostly sure is where things get uncomfortable. Here's the thing, almost every living anomaly lands here at minimum. The reason is completely practical. Lock a living creature in a box and ignore it, and the creature starves. That's an unacceptable outcome. So the moment something breathes, it requires active management, and active management means Euclid. SCP-173 is the clearest example. It looks like a statue, stable, physical, contained, but its behavior is entirely dependent on observation, and the Foundation can't fully predict or override that dependency. The moment a direct line of sight breaks, it moves. How fast, toward what, with what intent, the Foundation doesn't have complete answers. It holds still when watched. Beyond that, you're guessing. That's Euclid in one image. Not chaos, not certain doom, just a box you've locked, with something inside it you don't entirely understand, and that uncertainty compounds fast, which is exactly why Keter exists. Keter sounds like a death sentence. It sounds like the anomaly is going to kill everyone, destroy the world, and end reality itself. But here's the thing, Keter just means the box doesn't work. That's it. Keter class anomalies actively resist containment, escape regularly, or are so unpredictable that keeping them locked up is functionally impossible with current Foundation resources. Danger has nothing to do with it. A cat that randomly teleports to any location on Earth would be Keter class despite being completely harmless, because you literally cannot contain it. No box works. You lock it in a vault and 3 seconds later it's in someone's kitchen in Tokyo. That's Keter. The anomaly escapes and there's nothing you can do about it. SCP-106 is the perfect example. The old man phases through solid matter like it's not even there. Walls, floors, ceilings, none of it stops him. He retreats into pocket dimensions whenever he wants. You can build the strongest containment cell in the world, and he'll just walk through it like it's made of air. The box doesn't hold no matter how good the box is. That's what makes something Keter. It's not that it's going to end the world, it's that the Foundation can't keep it locked up reliably, and that creates a massive logistical nightmare. But if you think escaping anomalies are a headache, wait until you hear about the ones the Foundation uses as weapons. Thaumiel, everything we've covered so far has been about the Foundation containing anomalies. Thaumiel flips that completely. Thaumiel class SCPs aren't contained by the Foundation, they are the containment. These are anomalies so powerful or so useful that the Foundation has essentially weaponized them, deploying one anomaly to help control others. The Warden becomes the anomaly, which is, not ideal for anyone's peace of mind. Here's what makes it genuinely unsettling. Thaumiel is classified at the highest possible clearance level. Most Foundation personnel don't even know the class exists. We're not talking about restricted access. We're talking about a layer of secrecy so deep that only a tiny group beyond the O5 Council holds the full picture. The Foundation keeps secrets from its own people constantly, but Thaumiel is the secret about how they actually keep everything else under control. The clearest example is SCP-2000, a massive underground facility hidden beneath Yellowstone National Park. It's a complete human cloning and civilization reset system capable of repopulating the entire human species from scratch if an extinction-level event wipes everyone out. The Foundation doesn't just study it, they maintain it actively. It's their contingency against total human extinction, sitting dormant under a national park, waiting. That's Thaumiel in a sentence. The Foundation found something catastrophic, looked at it, and thought, actually, we could use this. If that sounds bad, Apollyon is the class for when none of that works. Apollyon Keter is a nightmare, but at least it's a nightmare with an ending you can write yourself out of. Apollyon is different. Apollyon is the class the Foundation assigns when containment has already failed, or when the math simply doesn't add up to any version of success. Not this is hard to contain. Hard is Keter. Apollyon means the anomaly is either already loose or it will breach regardless of what the Foundation does next, and no realistic intervention changes that outcome. The distinction matters, and it's brutal. Keter anomalies are actively fought, monitored, and held in check through enormous resource expenditure. There's struggle involved, but there's also hope embedded in that struggle. Apollyon removes the hope. The Foundation's role shifts entirely from containment to damage mitigation, which is a very clinical way of saying figure out how bad this gets and try to make it slightly less bad. These are the files written knowing nobody may survive to read them. Apollyon events correlate directly with K-class scenarios. The Foundation's internal designation for end-of-the-world categories: mass extinction, broken reality, permanent alteration of human consciousness. The whole menu. When Foundation researchers draft containment procedures for an Apollyon anomaly, they're not writing instructions, they're writing a record of what went wrong, in the best case that some future civilization eventually finds it. There's no mobilizing a task force, there's no emergency protocol that turns this around. The contingency plans for Apollyon events don't have good outcomes, only less catastrophic ones, which is, you know, not ideal. Next up is Archon, and the twist is that Archon anomalies could be contained. The Foundation just won't. Archon, most object classes are about what the Foundation can do. Archon is about what it chooses not to. Archon class anomalies are physically containable. The Foundation has run the numbers, knows exactly what it would take, and could absolutely throw one of these things in a box tomorrow. It just won't, because the consequences of actually doing that would be worse than leaving it alone. Here's where it gets philosophically uncomfortable. A lot of Archon class SCPs aren't just wandering loose in the world. They're woven into the fabric of consensus reality itself, meaning they're not anomalies sitting on top of normal existence. They're part of what makes normal existence work. Pull one out, and you're not just removing a threat, you're potentially unraveling something fundamental about how reality holds together. The box exists. The Foundation built it. They looked at it, looked at the anomaly, and quietly put the box back in the closet. What they do instead is watch intensively. Archon class SCPs get constant monitoring, emergency contingency frameworks, and detailed protocols for if something goes wrong without the Foundation's intervention. The containment trigger is always loaded. They just never pull it. That restraint is the unsettling part. Not because the Foundation is powerless here, but because they aren't. Every other class is the Foundation doing everything it can. Archon is the Foundation doing nothing on purpose, and trusting that staying their hand is the correct call. Whether it actually is remains an open question, which is genuinely disturbing, but at least Archon class anomalies are still out there. Neutralized class 1s aren't anymore, and that comes with its own very specific set of problems. Neutralized. Neutralized is the quietest classification on this entire list. No cosmic horror, no uncontainable reality warping threat, no Foundation weaponry. Just an anomaly that used to be anomalous and now isn't. That's it. That's the whole thing. The properties are gone. Permanently. Whether something was destroyed, depleted, died naturally, or the Foundation actively ended it, the result is the same. It gets reclassified, neutralized, and filed away. The Foundation keeps every single one of these records because understanding how anomalies stop being anomalous is genuinely valuable science. If something lost its properties under specific conditions, that's data. That's potentially replicable. Where it gets genuinely haunting. Some neutralized entries aren't dramatic. They aren't the result of Foundation task force, experimental weapon, or reality anchors holding long enough to finish the job. Some anomalies stop, properties fade. Whatever made something impossible quietly becomes possible to ignore, and then possible to forget, and then the file just says neutralized with no real explanation for why. That's not a containment success, even a containment failure. It's something stranger. It's the universe apparently changing its mind, and the Foundation left holding paperwork for something that no longer needs paperwork. The Foundation archives the records of things that no longer need record. There's something almost melancholy about that, in a way that Apollyon's world-ending weight and Archon's cosmic scale never quite managed to be. Some anomalies go out screaming, some just go out. Speaking of things that quietly stopped being what they were, the next class covers anomalies that were never really anomalous at all. Explained. Neutralized means something was genuinely anomalous and stopped being so. Explained means something was never anomalous in the first place, and the Foundation eventually proved it. That distinction sounds small. It really isn't. An explained class SCP, tag-EX, is what happens when the Foundation runs a full investigation, throws serious resources at something genuinely mysterious, and the answer comes back completely mundane. Normal physics, normal biology, entirely standard science that just hadn't been applied to the problem yet. Here's the thing, the Foundation doesn't bury these cases. It archives them deliberately because an explained outcome isn't an embarrassment. It's proof the system works. It means the investigative threshold was correct, the scientific method did its job, and the Foundation was right to take the report seriously in the first place. A mystery that turned out to be nothing is still a mystery that needed investigating. The Foundation keeps those files and frames them as institutional wins, which is honestly a level of self-awareness you don't expect from a secret organization that also employs reality anchors and at least one murderous old man made of rust. Explained is Neutralized's lighter, almost comedic sibling. Neutralized carries weight. Explained mostly just carries mild embarrassment and a signed off report saying turns out no. Good pacing reset. Now, if only all anomalies were that simple. Unfortunately, Ticonderoga exists. Ticonderoga. Here's a class that earns its place through sheer specificity. Most classifications cover broad categories of anomalies. Ticonderoga was built for one very particular combination of circumstances, and the clearest example of those circumstances happens to be living inside former United States Vice President Al Gore. Let me explain. Ticonderoga class covers anomalies that meet two criteria simultaneously. First, they cannot be contained with current Foundation technology. Second, they don't need to be. Both conditions have to be true at once, and that combination is rarer than it sounds. SCP-4444 is an extra-dimensional entity that can alter the dimensionality of its surroundings, communicate through Al Gore, and apparently has political ambitions, which is, not ideal to discover inside a former vice president. But despite all of that, it doesn't meet the threshold requiring active containment. The Foundation can't box it, they also don't have to. Ticonderoga it is. The class extends beyond that single case. Extraterrestrial anomalies existing completely outside the Foundation's operational reach also fall here, things so far beyond current capability that containment isn't even a theoretical option, and that pose no immediate threat requiring one. It's not Archon, where the Foundation could contain it but chose not to. It's not Apollyon, where the world is ending. It's its own specific thing. Can't touch it, don't have to. But Ticonderoga is a tidy situation compared to what's coming next, because Cernunnos is where the Foundation starts making decisions they'd probably rather not make. Cernunnos. Here's a class that forces the Foundation to look in the mirror. Cernunnos doesn't mean the anomaly is uncontainable. It doesn't mean containment would crack reality open. It means the Foundation looked at the cost, looked at what it would have to do, and said no. That's a very different kind of decision. The definition is straightforward enough. Cernunnos class anomalies are those where full containment is technically achievable but institutionally unjustifiable. Maybe it would drain resources on a scale that collapses other operations entirely. Maybe it would require the Foundation to cross ethical lines the Ethics Committee isn't willing to cross. Either way, the conclusion is the same. We could do this, and we won't. SCP-5849 is the clearest example on record. The Ethics Committee reviewed it, determined that containment was feasible, and then determined that feasible didn't mean necessary. The anomaly received Cernunnos classification and stayed where it was. Here's what makes this different from Archon. Archon is about cosmic consequences. Containing an Archon-class anomaly risks unraveling something fundamental about reality itself, which is, a fairly compelling reason to leave it alone. Cernunnos is more grounded than that. It's not that containment would break the universe. It's that containment would cost too much, or demand too much, or compromise something the Foundation still considers worth protecting, which is honestly kind of surprising. The Foundation is not an institution historically known for its restraint or its compassion, but Cernunnos exists, which means somewhere inside that bureaucracy there's a line they won't cross just to tick a containment box. That's the class that humanizes the whole institution. And it sets up an interesting question for what comes next. What happens when containment itself becomes the problem? Hemal. Most of the classes we've covered describe what an anomaly does. Hemal describes what the Foundation does. Specifically, it describes what happens when the Foundation does exactly what it's supposed to do, and somehow makes everything dramatically worse. Hymo class is assigned when the act of containment itself generates new anomalous phenomena, not a breach, not an escape. The box working perfectly, and the box being the problem. SCP-3240 is the case study here. Originally Keter class, the anomaly caused predatory animals to compulsively cannibalize themselves. Genuinely disturbing, obviously dangerous, but containable. The Foundation isolated the affected animals. Containment held, problem solved, except then the plant started growing animal tissue. Herbivorous animals began spontaneously appearing in areas that had none before. The affected region, the one that only existed because of Foundation containment, started expanding at 30 kilometers per day. Let that sink in, 30 kilometers every single day, not because the original anomaly escaped, because they successfully contained it. Here's where it gets genuinely unsettling as a concept. The Foundation exists to prevent anomalous catastrophes. Hymal is the formal acknowledgement that the Foundation can cause them, not through negligence, not through incompetence, but through doing everything correctly. The intervention becomes the catastrophe. The cure becomes the disease. They built a special classification just to track the times when being good at their job made things worse. That's not a containment failure. That's something much harder to fix. Decommissioned class up next is what happens when fixing it stops being an option entirely. Decommissioned. Decommissioned is one of those SCP classes that feels important, but it is actually more of a historical artifact than a modern category. On the archived SCP wiki page, decommissioned articles are described as SCPs that were not just deleted from the main series, but also destroyed in-universe, and the page flat out calls them a former wall of shame. The site also says the practice is no longer used, and that decommissioning articles are generally not done anymore, which is a big clue that this was less of a standard classification and more of an older community tradition the wiki eventually moved away from. And honestly, that is what makes decommission interesting. It is not really about safe, formal Foundation taxonomy like Euclid or Keter. It is about the SCP community experimenting with the idea of, what if this anomaly was so bad, or the article itself was so poorly received that it got wiped out completely? That is why Decommissioned has this weird double identity. In universe, it suggests an anomaly that was intentionally destroyed. Out of universe, it also carries the baggage of being a kind of public graveyard for retired articles, which is why it feels so different from normal object classes. That weirdness is also why people still argue about it. In outer circles, one side sees decommissioned SCPs as clashing with the Foundation's whole contain and study identity, almost pushing them closer to groups like the GOC, but other commenters argue that last resort destruction still fits the Foundation if containment is impossible, unsustainable, or too dangerous to maintain. So the best way to explain Decommissioned is probably this. It is less a true active class and more a relic from an older era of SCP writing, back when the wiki was more willing to turn bad fits, impossible cases, and meta commentary into their own little cemetery of anomalies. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.